and just raise hand, and you'll be first. Ma'am, if you're not on the list?
I'm on the list.
Go list, okay. You'll be on, you may be first, but you're not. All right, so I'll take the first question is Ron Duplessis.
I guess I don't have any questions. My observation is that I guess I'll be in a retirement home about the time that this thing kicks off.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is one of the parts
I see what you're on.
that drives me crazy about being in public office is, I mean, I literally came in day one and I would have thought at this point we were turning dirt, and we're not. And so,
What is your vision for this? I mean, when this conjured up, and I think there's some other monies in other areas that this applies to GNOs and other for-profit organizations. It seems like you have access to it. But I think one of the things that we're opposed to is it doesn't seem like we can go build outforms everywhere. So I think that's clear, and Jefferson would take maybe the parking portion of it, and then you would actually put the restaurants in the western park. Is that the vision or the development?
I mean, none of that, I think Stephanie said not set in stone. I mean, the words I would use is, I'm not even sure that the developers or anybody has thought about where everything would be laid out, other than the fact that we know that the park and where the corridors aren't to be touched. I mean,
Yeah, and to the water piece, and that was part of, and that was my main issue with the Pearl. In the letter I wrote to DNR, I have concerns. God, Joe and I have so many, things going on with sewage and water board and trying to deal with that. We don't want anything that blocks that outfall canal. And that was the main piece that I put in my letter of objection about the Pearl. So that's the one piece that I would say we both feel very firmly about. But as far as where, from a proximity wise, that hasn't been determined.
So let me, if I may share in, because I probably have more experience than anyone. I think what both Councilperson Giarrusso and Representative Hilford are looking for us as a group to really get a pulse on what the neighbors and the stakeholders here are interested in. Because just like we heard lots of things, they heard lots of things. Today might not be the time to give that because we may not have a firm or solidified idea. But I think the thoughts of asking questions like that. But as to the question about where are you talking about, I've been through this and seen at least 3, and I believe 4, proposals of some form of development in the Reston area. It has always been concentrated west of West Roadway, meaning on what was the parking lot area and where the restaurant sites were. So there's never been any proposal, I have to take that back for a second, any meaningful proposal to put anything east of West Roadway. But you don't know, West Roadway is the road that when you come over the levee and come straight across towards the breakwater is what bisects West End Park. There was one, let me take that back. There was one proposal done by somebody voluntarily putting an extensive commercial development on the east end of West End Park, but that was something done by somebody at a request for someone who had no official capacity ever. All of the meaningful conversations have always been about whatever development may be, that it would be on the western side of West Road. So, Rick Sinclair is next.
Yeah, I might want to defer to Charles on this, but what about the 1906 edict that says that land has got to be restricted to a park or a, what's it?
Amusement.
Or amusement.
Well, I mean,
And it's the first, I'm going to lay the whole question out.
sure.
So that's one part of it. Second part, there are 3 parts. The second part.
Wait, excuse me. And I told you, it's for everybody. I'm not going to have multiple questions that are going to dominate the thing. Yeah, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'll make them real quick. Jefferson Parish has already turned down putting restaurants on their side of the canal. Why would they let them put them on our side? And third, why does it have to be a major project? One of the most important things, or the successful things that have been there since the hurricane, was Coconut Beach. And I've talked to a number of people here about putting in pickleball courts. Not a major project, but certainly it would appeal to the whole city to have them there, and we, as people who live there, have enough restaurants, noises, and bands, and trash, and everything else. We don't need more at that point. So those are my 3 points.
All right, well, let me answer number one. As a lawyer, I understand Mr. Marsalis' interpretation, but I think he's wrong as a matter of law. That's number one. I would say that even though 1906 was passed, Fitzgerald's was there, Bruning's was there, Jaeger's, so, well, but you're asking, wait, sir, you're asking a question, you're asking me to be quiet, so please let me finish. They are forms of amusement. Now, that would be my argument. But to dispel all of that, we're gonna file a new bill making sure that restaurants or something that is compatible with restaurants can go there to take away that legal argument, because that's exactly what upended the Four Seasons, was conversations about what could go there and what could not go there. So I disagree with it, but I understand what the argument is, and much like affordable housing, let's just take the argument away and make it very easy. Maybe people in this room are gonna disagree with me, but I know Councilmember Van Franken has told me multiple times that putting those restaurants back has been one of the most hit articles in the history of NOLA.com in the past year. Why? Because of the nostalgia that was there, and the restaurants that were there, what they meant to, me growing up as a kid, I remember running up that ramp to Fitzgerald all of the time. I understand that its lands have been passive for a long period of time, so going back to having it being active is something that's different, but it's also been a commercial space. It's always been a commercial space, and it's been fallow because of Katrina. And so I question particularly our greatest asset in the city, which is our water. Why would we want to leave something basically fallow for such a long period of time when it was commercial and it was such a success for so long until I think the city got rapacious and started charging people? And that's what ultimately happened. To your other point, though, your last point, the other thing we want to do is develop an economic development district in this area and charge an extra like half penny of sales tax. So that way, more police protection, trash pickup, cleanup around the area, because you can't, this area is more secluded than other parts of the city, and to make sure that services are being delivered properly, that's the thing.
And that money would stay here.
Stay
That's
right
not
here.
what's
It
done.
wouldn't go to New Orleans East or uptown or anywhere else.
Eric Byers next. Eric, where are you?
Right.
So, okay.
This West End opportunity thing, are you all aware of that? I mean, what this is? Do you know who made this? Charles. It talks about saturation of restaurants, which is pretty much a fact out here. Restaurants all over there that weren't there when Brunings and Fitzgerald's and all over here.
Wait, hold on.
Always
You
been
just said two.
Hong Kong, it was Bart's, it
Excuse
was
me.
Fort Hole,
Excuse me.
Okay.
Great Mexican, there were many restaurants there.
Yeah, there were.
That's good. So, all right, but then you've got a ton of them on the other side, and they got so many that they don't want them over there anymore. Are you gonna allow, it sounded like you weren't gonna allow them to build over the water. That
We
that
don't- we
was
don't
not
control that
going
decision.
to be a possibility. And if you don't have them over the water, you're not gonna have the same nostalgia of you running up the ramp to Fitzgerald. It's just not gonna be there. I gotta think that we used to have a bridge across, and a lot of times you had people driving and walking, coming across from that direction. You get crowded out here, and you got one road coming in and out now. You used to have two. The trash buildup is gonna happen if you have stuff on lane.
Is there a question?
I'm stating, I thought we were supposed to be able to state our opinion.
I understand, but I
Well, Mark,
understood
okay.
that.
Yeah, that's all right.
The question is, we don't, well, I don't
Look,
have a
I
question, I just
think
say, I don't,
from
I'm against it totally.
Look, I think from a practical perspective, all those things have to be thought about. You gotta think about trash pickup, you gotta think about mitigation of all this. So, I mean, it's certainly something that'll have to be considered as a part of the development.
And we live in neighborhoods too. And I mean, 80% of what I deal with is constituent issues, right? I mean, I am blown up by how the road work is in my district, the trash complaints, the lighting complaints, public safety. Those are by far blight are the biggest 5 issues in District A in pretty much every part of the city. We understand traffic, noise, density are always going to be issues for neighbors. We are not going to voice something on people, particularly who live right next to something that they're uncomfortable with. And by the way, we're your neighbors too. I mean, that's one of the things I get a lot of times in other places. Well, how can you understand what happens? You live in Lakeview. Well, I mean, I lived right down there too. My mom lives right down there. So obviously, we want something that's workable for the residents and workable for the city.
Eric, what would be your suggestion? Do you have a suggestion?
I like the volleyball courts or something along those lines.
Okay. Gail Wall?
I live in the neighborhood too, grew up here, remember all that in Southern. We have a lot of traffic, and Joe, I want to thank you for getting this city to clean up the weeds growing up in the neutral ground along Lake Shore and Lake Marina. We have a lot of traffic. I'd love to see a crosswalk come back at Lake Shore and Lake Marina, so I don't have to get playing chicken in the road with my dog. Because people, they don't stop, they roll right through you. And in traffic is an problem here. But my concern is, why would we agree to the 65-foot height if we're not gonna have buildings, condos, or anything else going in this area? Why would we agree?
I mean, the answer was because our height is different than Jefferson Parish, and we're trying to make sure everything balances
So
between
what?
those two areas.
So what?
I know you don't like the answer to the question, but that is the answer. Because you have development that makes it very hard. When developers are coming into an area, what are they looking for? Predictability and consistency. We're already we're gonna have problems with who controls the permitting process, who controls the enforcement, who controls the utilities that are right there. And all these are things that have slowed down the progress, but we're trying to work our way through. So you try and make it as consistent as possible in order to make sure it's attractive for people to do.
I think if I remember, there was a 5-foot difference.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It was 60 to
Okay,
75 feet.
one question.
Yeah, I
One-
wanna follow up with a statement, I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
But if you open up to 65-foot height, then when we're all gone, they're gonna come back and say, oh, well, you agreed to 65-foot height. We can come back and change the ordinances or the statute or whatever they need to do, because they have now that they can go up to 65.
But they can also they can change the law. I mean, laws can be changed all the time. I mean, that's how it works. Laws get changed all the time. That's why we have the new streets right outside the city.
All right.
And I
Next
think to your,
question.
I was just
Go
gonna
ahead.
say, Carrie, I think to your question about the crosswalk, we really did bring that up between, Lakefront Management and Authority.
It's-
I don't,
it's more-
is it city or?
It's more element.
Okay.
Yeah, but I know that's a
Email my
major
office
area
and
that people have
explain
thought.
the area that you're looking to have that, we can certainly look into that.
Michael James is next.
Unfortunately, I don't have a question, I have a statement.
Okay.
I've lived out here pre-Katrina, so experienced all the restaurants, everything out here, the volleyball court, my office was out here. This is a fraction of what it used to be, so traffic, we gotta stop acting like this is our private little island out here. The city needs exposure to the water, we need more waterfront property here. The best thing we can do for the marina, the park, is to get money coming in. Who's tired of looking at a West End park as the most depressing thing in the world? I saw a neighbor out with a chainsaw cutting palm trees, because nobody out here is maintaining this stuff, so. You have one resident that's 100% behind you.
Thank you.
Next question, I'm sorry, is it Bobby Dupuy?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
When they were building the pumping station, the area we're talking about, that was a gathering area for all of their supplies supposedly. And it's still fenced off. Pumping station's been finished for years. Why is it still fenced off right there? That's part of the park.
I can handle that. After the pumping station was finished, the city then turned it over to the laydown yard for the construction company doing the improvements along Breakwater Drive, and it's still under their control, although I assume getting close. Brian?
Yeah.
So that's why, because right now it's still under the control of the company that's been doing the construction of the boat launch and Breakwater Drive.
And
when
that's
those-
all finished also.
Well, they're not quite complete, but they're getting close, and when they're complete, it's gonna be turned back to the Municipal Yacht Harbor Corporation for them to decide what they're gonna do.
And I will say, we put the fence in because it's dangerous. There's water leaks, there's lots of, it's not a safe area for pedestrians or anybody, so we fenced it to secure it. Once the construction's finished and they clear out, we're gonna look at short-term uses and opening. But right now, it's not a safe area for people to be wandering around. So we installed the fence to give some security.
Brian, back of the envelope, how much money have we gotten to invest in that area from FEMA? Do you
In
know?
which particular area?
This whole area, I mean, this whole area.
I mean, I don't think there's any FEMA projects for that
No,
specific
no, but
area,
over
but
this way.
it was 26 million, I believe.
I mean, there's been real money invested. I mean, I think that's where I'm coming from is, yes, sir.
The marina was approximately 26 million, I think they put in, this nice floating marina. But I can tell you, until you build a real breakwater out here, that marina's gonna be gone next storm.
I mean, they
You
did
need to
raise,
build breakwater drive probably 20 feet high, the jetty.
they raised it by
Otherwise,
8
marina's
feet.
gone.
There is a bike fee.
It was raised by 8 feet.
No, it'll be gone. We had a real marina there, a solid marina. This floating
All
marina
right.
will float away.
Okay. Next is Rick Paul.
That's me. So the concept of the, whatever you're gonna put out there, restaurants, was the original concept that I heard, right? It was gonna be a multiple tenant building that had to be on land. So my question is, why does it have to be on land? The pilings that existed when Fitzgerald's and all those places got washed away are still there. And so I was told, well, it restricts the flow of the water from the pump station, but yet the pilings are still there. So couldn't something be put over water since the pilings are still there? You've got the same
I
obstruction.
mean,
I can answer that.
Good.
I work with the Army Corps out there, the Corps will not let you do it.
Yeah, right.
Because if they cut on all those pumps at the same time, they'll wash away anything that's there.
Have
They haven't
have-
done it yet, no. They've never had to. But
So it was
those are
it was a
16 pumps that are 60,000 gallons a minute. You'll have a tidal wave coming out of there if they cut them off. So the Corps has put down the law, you can't build anything in the water, except where Fitzgerald's is, because it's out of, or was, it's out of the stream.
tucked around the corner.
Yeah, it's around the corner, but as far as where the old restaurants were, the Corps will not let you build anything.
And lastly, the affordable housing rumor that was floating around, y'all got that documented in whatever you're gonna present,
Zero housing.
zero house.
So there can't be any affordable housing with zero housing. I mean, that's just the easiest way to handle it,
Yeah.
right? Just take it off the board.
Lee Giorgio.
I'm Lee Georgia, boathouse number 80, been on here about 30 years. During that time, I sit on a regional planning commission representing Jefferson Parish for the last 25 years. As a start, there have been several studies of the studies of the studies. We didn't come to the planning commission through the years, so it's helpful hint, somebody might want to look at those again, go consideration. And going forward, I'm assuming, are there any funds available from the parishes or from the federal government that would step in for infrastructure? That's gonna be handled. I mean, in the past too, we've had a bunch of developers come through with proposals, but when it comes time for where's the money coming from, it just seems to get away from us because it's very expensive and very difficult. Then you get to the point of, if you do an RFP, like, if you're gonna be a regular real estate developer and you come up with something, the concept that everybody can finally agree on, and then where you can get the money, how much it's gonna cost, and quantify all that, then you can get further to what you really feel when we can move forward. So, got more questions than answers, concerned about the parking, concerned about the park, that are all challenges. So, again, we might look at what's been done in the past and move forward in the future.
Hi, Roger Watkins, I'm on the board. As you mentioned, we're all new, so we have a lot to learn in a short period of time. We're all kind of thrown into this. You mentioned that the New Orleans Building Corp is going to be working with us on this to kind of help bring us up to speed essentially. What does that look like? At what point do they kind of turn things over to us, or do we decide on something? What does it look like?
You wanna start, Brian?
I mean, I've been having meetings with
Okay.
them, we're in very early stages, but they've done some legwork, which has not been approved for release. And then it's basically just early on kind of figuring out how we're gonna work together and who we need to retain to make the process forward. So that's all happening behind the scenes right now. The only things that are happening are, we need to put these in place so that we can move forward and get the development going. So nothing having to do with the actual development, we're lining up all our ducks so that we can actually start. And that's happening now.
And look, the two reasons of NOPC, in all candor, are number one, they have the background of doing this, and I understand it. And number two, their director, Cindy Connick, is probably one of the most trusted people inside city government. So, I mean, Brian, you're doing a great job. I just want to make sure that we also have somebody else who has the expertise and who has this type of experience before. You can be a part of putting the Four Seasons downtown, and I think working on something that would be significant and smaller in scale. Somebody who has that kind of experience is kind of what we're all looking for.
Okay, folks, so we've exhausted the list. So if anybody else has a question, when you stand up, at least say your name, but I know your name.
But I won't
Go ahead,
that.
Barry.
Greg, I have a birdhouse out here too. But I park out here, but I reside in Jefferson, which is different. As far as, obviously, these are long-term projects, since we're not even at RFP, we haven't really made much movement. And I understand, the trifecta is the best way to describe it. I've never won a trifecta that no one in this room has either. But on a temporary basis, once they do finish the construction, I'm sure Brian's probably got more knowledge of this than anybody. Do we have any money to clean it up? I mean, it's got some huge water leak. I don't know what that's about.
Yes. The water leak is.
Something, at least clean it and make
That is
it a
in
park again, or what are we gonna do?
That is in the project, the work.
Is it gonna be a grassy area, or is it?
I don't believe we're gonna grass it, but when they finish taking all the equipment and construction debris and the leftover debris out, which they're working on by the end of the year, we're gonna look at options to do something with it in the short term, but it's gonna be cleaned up, and
And we have some funding for that?
there is some funding, yeah, to do some basic.
That'll be an
Site-
LIHMC project.
Yeah, that'll be some basic
I
site.
just wanted to make sure we had some funding, because this obviously is years in the making. So we don't want.
No, we're not gonna leave it like it is.
Yeah, kind
I
of a
mean,
dump.
I put the fence up because it is unsafe,
Right,
and we're looking at different options on what to do with it in the short term.
great, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Guy Williams, I'm a boathouse owner and also a resident of Lake Vista. I think it'd be great to have pickleball, Coconut Beach, something like that, and a beach bar overlooking the water. So I encourage y'all, thank you for being here.
Okay, I saw there was a hand. Okay, yes.
I'm Rebecca Stilling, I'm a social worker and I'm a naturalist. I'm a resident of Jefferson, I work in Orleans. But I'm very fond of this area, I come walk here all the time, look at the pelicans. There's a colony of roosting pelicans there, up to about 100 of them. And I just think it's really important to preserve the natural spaces for the animals. There's all kind of birds there, but it's also very important for us human beings to have access to blue and green space. I walk very often in that area, and I was thinking there's a way to make it a park, a very nice park. Maybe put a restaurant or something in. I'm so relieved you don't want to put high-rise housing there. And I mean, I think there's money's available, right? The state, Cassidy, didn't he make money available for the Lake Pontchartrain environmental projects? And of course, y'all know all kind of stuff I don't, because I'm not an engineer or, familiar with a lot of stuff y'all are. That would be my hope.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm Barry Williams, I'm one of the houses here. The Jefferson Parish, on their side of the canal, they're building a park, and now they're building a blue way in the water for paddleboarding and things like that. I'm sure they'd be real happy if we put the commercial stuff on our side of the canal, and I get to share the revenue. Why, there's nothing in the CEA that says it needs to be, that it has to be a PCP. Have y'all considered just a public, Coconut Beach and pickleball and a park, things like that, that would require a lot of money. Have y'all considered a public development?
I don't think anything is excluded, Jeff. I think in the RPC draft that we mentioned, there are aspects of recreation, that people can bike there, walking paths, opening up things more. So all of that is a piece of what was conceived in 2016 and
Kayak
2017.
rentals, that sort of thing.
Right. So I don't think anything is etched in stone, but let's just be candid, there's two very fundamental different visions, and, you know, we have to see also, as Lee pointed out, like, economics are gonna drive this decision. If developers don't think they're gonna make any money, then they're not gonna say they wanna put it in.
That's my question. Why is there a development? Why aren't we doing PPPs? Why don't we just have a public development of a park? I mean,
Because this area has traditionally been commercially used. It has been, I mean,
I understand what it's traditionally been, but we're talking about the future, moving forward with it now and redeveloping it into something else.
I get it. I would just say that, again, to what I said earlier, we underutilize our riverfront, our lakefront all the time. And so we have City Park that is a stone's throw from here. You've got the passive park that's there already that will not be touched in any of this process. Why do we want to keep on saying we have a jewel that is not being utilized, it isn't making money, it isn't helping the residents at all, isn't doing anything to survey the other areas and keep on making this? Plus, all of those things are gonna have to be maintained. So let's just say we do a park, and pickleball, and everything. Who's paying for all that? The city? So we're gonna pay for more I mean, how much does it cost to run a court now at City Park?
$20 an hour.
Yeah.
20 an
Yeah,
hour.
20 an hour. I mean, it's not gonna be a public thing, because you're gonna have to charge money for
Not
it.
at
Right.
I will say this, though, I think when we started this process, I don't even think pickleball was a thing.
Yeah, it's not, pickleball's all new.
Pickleball courts are very big money makers right
No,
now.
I'm joking, though, I know that's been in the past few years.
All right, okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Does Jefferson Parish, White Williams, Lake Pontchartrain, well, not Lake Pontchartrain Basin, Pontchartrain Conservancy, I forget who I was.
We want to tell.
Does Jefferson Parish actually extend onto the land?
Yes, they do expand a
So-
little bit onto it.
Then is the border then between Lakefront Management Authority and Jefferson Parish? Would that, no? Does Lakefront Management Authority have any control over anything?
No, not yet.
Okay, so this is just the city.
This is the city.
So it's New Orleans and, or Orleans Parish and Jefferson.
Yes, sir.
Municipal Yacht Harbor Corporation, which is a corporation owned by the city that leased that area, that the city leased that area. So it's not technically the city. If you ask about who owns and controls. Okay, now, I mean, Great